Anyway, to get started, well, everybody that's going to be tuning into this, thanks for tuning into another edition of the Announcers Hour podcast. Last time we had Kyle Seeloff, but without further ado, I bring on AJ Ricketts, who's in the spotlight tonight, the amazing guest for this second episode. And really, he's been doing a lot of good work around Miami. He's now the voice of FIU and the Panthers, also Miami alum and former sports director at WVUM. So, it's also been featured on the ACC Network, ESPN Plus, Apple TV, and the whole nine yards. So, AJ, I'm just wondering, can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, thanks for having me. Always good to talk to those who are currently in the WVUM circle. It's a nice network of friends through the years, and always good to chat with everybody. Things are staying busy, but it honestly, in comparison to maybe November, it settled down a little bit. It's the crossover of football and basketball season. Just focusing on basketball right now, but it's gonna ramp up here pretty soon with college baseball entering the fray, some track and field as well, and then all the soccer seasons start too. MLS Next Pro, NWSL, USL. So the slate will pick up here pretty soon. So just trying to enjoy the current schedule of two road basketball games and then two home games, and going back and forth with that until February, March. So enjoyed some time back home recently for the holidays, and now we're ready to get back into it.
That's amazing. And also, can you just speak a little bit about how you got, I guess, to your current position and doing play-by-play in general? Because again, one of the things I harped on last time was this kind of a definitely unique career path to take.
Yeah, to condense the timeline, after graduating in 2015 from UM, in that senior year was, having been sports director, took the sports anchor reporter route to break into the business. So I went up the East Coast to Wilmington, North Carolina. Was an anchor at NBC, Fox, Wilmington, and that was a great place to develop my voice, get reps in. Um, just learn about being a professional and, taking ownership of your career and what you're trying to do. And fortunately, while I was doing that, I would be able to take flights down to Miami to call games for ACC Network Extra. And those were invaluable opportunities, calling baseball, tennis, track, and continuing to do play-by-play on the side. And through those reps and building a tape and a reel through that, was able to put in for and fortunately get the FIU play-by-play job in 2017. And I've always personally enjoyed play-by-play, gotten more of a reward personally through that. So when they offered the job, it was I was fired up to take it. That's when Butch Davis had his first year at FIU as well, and the program was really investing in football. So it was great to come back to South Florida, city I love. Obviously, spent 4 years here previously, and transitioned back to play-by-play. And through the years, I've been able to start contributing to other platforms, whether that be doing some more ACC Network Extra, most recently getting in the Apple ecosystem with MLS Next Pro, developing the ESPN Plus production capabilities at FIU. So it's cool to have some different platforms throughout the year. We had a coaches show in Bally Sports, Florida recently, and we're looking to get that back as well. So it's been a lot of fun to be back here in Miami and continuing to pursue what's next.
Yeah, you got a lot going on. I'm also wondering on the conversation of play-by-play, is there any like big voices that you looked up to like growing up?
Yeah, I think it's always a mix of taking little things or admiring certain things about different broadcasters, but also not simply trying to replicate them, right? Having your own voice and style. I always liked how, I'm not unique in this, like how Gus Johnson can, how excitable and how big he can get on the big time games. I've always admired how Reese Davis can paint a picture. His command of the English language, you just listen to him paint the picture of an opening to College Game Day, and I always think he does that so well. Peter Drury, calling soccer in England, I always think his calls bring something special to the table. So there's different guys. Ian Dark, I think all of us were very admired his call, the 2010 World Cup in the United States, and his soccer calls. So yeah, a lot of different guys and voices through the years, but try not to copy or replicate any one of them per se while you're trying to find your own voice.
Yeah, and did you, by the way, do you have a favorite sport to announce? And did you play a lot of sports growing up?
Well, probably running was the big one, right? That's what I ended up doing in college. I would have I would have loved to have been able to, I don't know, be a basketball player or maybe a golfer. That pay off in the long term too. But no, running was what I always took most seriously growing up. It's ironic because I'll tell people broadcasting track is honestly one of the more difficult ones to prepare for, just with the sheer volume of athletes you're covering in events and the length of the broadcast. But it's still a lot of fun. But yeah, track and cross country were my big two. I loved basketball growing up, and I wanted to be the next Duke point guard. For some reason, that didn't work out, but it's okay.
That's all right. Did you have a favorite athlete too, when you're, at least when you're growing up? I know, like, once you're a broadcaster, you have literally a million players to, like, keep track of, and you probably don't have any favorites and keep it neutral. But like when you're growing up, do you have a favorite athlete?
Yeah, I mean, I'd probably this is gonna annoy a lot of Miami people, but I annoy them all the time anyway, so that's okay. JJ Redick, when I was growing up, definitely he was the guy. Ichiro, I'm a Mariners fan, so in the baseball realm, love watching Ichiro. But yeah, JJ and Ichiro probably the big two. Probably annoyed all my friends in middle school and high school talking about them and not shutting up about how they were doing. But yeah, JJ and Ichiro, they were fun to watch.
Yeah, I bet. And I kind of talked about that because a lot of people, when they're mentioning sports, they're looking at their favorite athletes. But when I talk to like other play-by-play people and others that are announcing or in even roles like you were in, like sports anchor, they have like a favorite, media person or broadcaster to look up to. And so, off that point, when did you start kind of looking at that as a potential like interest? I don't know, it was when you were growing up or in high school, or even when you got to Miami, like when did you start thinking you want to be doing that?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think I always had it in the back of my mind. Like I remember after I went to a Duke game in seventh grade, like I stayed after, and I don't think I stayed after to get the players' autographs. I went upstairs to wait until Dave O'Brien and Rick Majerus came down from the broadcast booth, the crow's nest they call it at Cameron, and wanted to get their autographs. I wanted the broadcasters' autographs after that game. And but I never really followed up or took it seriously. Maybe until, let's say, sophomore or junior year of high school. Um, I was in student council, and student council sponsored, it was He-Man volleyball is what it was called. So the guys would seniors would play the freshmen, sophomores, juniors, and then there's a tournament over that day. And it's like I raised my hand in a student council meeting. I was like, what if me and my buddy Chris, like, we wear suits and you give us mics and we like commentate the game? And I think they said yes, just to like appease us, just to shut. Okay, you guys go do whatever, and we'll let you do it. Just to shut us up. We'll see how this goes. And we were so over the top about it. Interviewing the coaches, asking them provoking them with like tough questions, and what was a completely ridiculous environment. But it was fun, and so I said, people do this for a living. So I actually sent an email like maybe a week or two later, like Panhandle Sports Broadcasting, who streamed the junior college games for Pensacola Junior College basketball. And for some reason, they gave me an opportunity to start calling their games. And I think that eventually made my application to Miami look a little bit more formidable, and then actually started to get some structure Like I think my first game I called at UM was Duke Miami volleyball, and from there, was really taking it seriously and trying to network and learn, and it was in the VUM UM system at that point. So it kind of got started on a whim, something ridiculous, just to have fun, but that kind of opened my eyes to it being a career down the road.
Nice. And I'm kind of curious because I feel like I talked to Kyle and he had a few like funny moments to share about when he first started out in his very first games. I can remember I was pretty, and I'd probably be appalled if I listened back. Like, what was it like when you got, your first few games, and was there ever like a moment of doubt? You're like, I don't know, this is kind of tough.
Yeah, I've made all those videos and tapes private on YouTube and probably destroyed the evidence of many others. It's tough to watch like your first broadcast, but it's also like it also shows how far you've come down the road, in time. Yeah, I mean, there were I tried not to take any moments too hard. Like I looked at it, it's a process. I didn't think I was going to be amazing when it started, right? I there were moments like I'd send my stuff off for feedback to some Power Five broadcasters, and the feedback like was a very long email of stuff to get better at and things I was doing wrong, right? And I still reference it with some friends to this day. Like, I got to work on my diction and inflection. It just wasn't right. It wasn't good enough today. But like that, those like you learn to appreciate those emails and that feedback and people that take the time to help you get better, right? That's what we really needed. Trying to like a humbling moment. There were yeah, there were calls and things I always thought I could do better. Trying to of one off the top of my head. There certainly I feel them when I think of humbling moments more so my first professional job to to be honest with you, like a live hit that just went terrible, or like a moment that I thought was like really awkward, that I didn't do well. And it could be as simple as like my tie knot wasn't great for when I anchored the 6 a.m. morning news. And so someone tweeted in and a website link for different how to tie your tie and said you might want to bookmark this for reference. Like, just like the embarrassment of that, like just things like that. I tweeted back, it's like, thank you, I actually will put this to great use. So yeah, play by play, there's I tried to take it as learning experiences in college. But there were always great times and great moments throughout those 4 years.
Yeah, that's good. I actually had this similar issue when I was anchoring you on TV news where I didn't realize like how bad my tie was on the first episode until the second one when they fixed it. But coming off that point, you get to Miami, kind of like what was it like when you first got to because there's a lot of people that are gonna go into their first experience in play-by-play or a new place where they anticipate like getting into it or whatever they're gonna get into. How did you like first break in when you arrived with WVUM?
Yeah, the thing about VUM, it's a tight knit family and people want to help you, right? Like I talked to the sports director who had just graduated before I started as a freshman. Like, I had a 30-minute hour phone call with him before I started, Justin Antwell, and he's giving me showing me the ropes, telling me what it's going to be like, giving me advice. And then Chris Whittingham was the sports director when I started. Um, and he was awesome, giving me a lot of opportunities, giving me a lot of reps early. And there were other broadcasters who had my back from the start, right? Like, I don't think my first broadcasts were anything amazing, but like I think I called it was the Miami Rutgers women's basketball game, and I had my charts, like I had that going, and I did a lot of research and I prepped, like I was ready for the broadcast. How I called it so much to get better at, but I was ready for it. And my broadcast partner, like, he saw that and was like, you're doing more than 95% of the broadcasters here are doing. You keep putting this effort in, it's going to be an awesome 4 years for you. Like, I had that kind of support. I was Eric Hahn. I still remember that. And I'm a freshman trying to get my feet wet, and it was a team, right? WVUM was a team. So I always appreciated that. That helps give me more confidence right away. Started getting to travel on some trips at the end of freshman year. Went to Wake Forest for basketball, Duke for baseball, and then really started traveling a lot. And at that point, you're kind of immersing yourself with those teams, with those coaches, and the confidence just starts to really um, starts to develop. Um, you're you're just in the middle of it all, and it's a really wonderful period of time when you feel like you can take ownership over whatever aspect it is, whether it's the UMTV side, whether it's calling games at VUM, staying after and doing hits and features. It's really just this blank canvas where you can take ownership of what you want to do. So once I realized that, I feel like I was at almost every game, and it was man, it was a lot of fun.
It's nice. Do you remember like any fun incidents with like Coach Meyer or Coach L? Because I feel like those two get a lot of press for their energy and what they bring to the basketball programs. Plus, WVUM does a lot of obviously basketball coverage on women's and men's teams basketball.
Yeah, man, both. I'm so thankful, and just they're both still coaching at Miami. It's amazing. It feels like such a connection, right, to our time as undergrads. Like, when I started UM, that was Coach L's first year. Coach Meyer had already been there a little bit, but um, I was around Coach Meyer a bit more too, since we're the flagship station for women's hoops, but also got to call on men's games. And Coach L came on our talk show that we started at the Rat King Talk Live, and was a guest, and got to share some pretty cool moments with him. Coach Meyer, I'll never I'll never forget, like, got to run in New Orleans with her. I think ran 4 or 5 miles on her birthday. Like, we ran through downtown New Orleans because that was like tradition, to run a certain amount of miles on her birthday. So we shared some miles in NOLA, and she was always so great, for you guys know this now too. She just wants to do everything she can to help us, but she will, if you like prove you want to put in the work and put in the time. Like, she recognizes that out of the broadcasters too, not just her athletes, and so that was always really cool. So I tried to give my best to the women's basketball team, and man, there were some really fun years. But yeah, remember going to her family's lake house in Clemson, when we were there with the team, and sharing in those moments. So yeah, Coach Meyer, she's awesome, first class, and I'm glad more of the country got to see that this past year with that Elite Eight, nearly Final Four run too. So that was pretty cool to see. But just everyone around the program is whether it's Margie or Lonnie or whoever it is, they're awesome.
Nice. And I'm just wondering also too, like your day to day kind of going back to play by play. First of all, did it really like change going from you're in college to now a full-time job? And secondly, can you kind of take me through, I guess, what you typically do on like a game day and like with your prep and how early you are to the stadium and X, Y, and Z?
Yeah, I'd say it's a huge difference from when I was at WECT and anchoring and reporting. You have to be prepping story ideas. Your schedule revolves around, other athletes, coaches a lot of the time. VOSOTs, highlights, features. Just always, it's hectic. You're shooting, writing, editing, social media, web stories, just everything. It's a very all-encompassing kind of thing. Play by play gives you a bit more ownership of your time over the course of the week. Say we have a Thursday, Saturday slate of basketball games at home on ESPN Plus. I'm spending that week watching the last game or two of both teams, having scheduling and having Zoom calls with both coaching staffs, or both head coaches, I should say, um, making my boards for both teams, researching, finding any articles on players that I can use for stories or context on the broadcast. game day, I'll probably get there in 2 or 3 hours before the game. I've had our production meeting with our director at that point, so we know what's going to be on the open. We know our player spotlights, talking about maybe any end game features we can do, whether it's if it's late in the game and a player's hit a game-winning shot earlier in the year, I know we may go to that B-roll, the game-winning shot, or something more lighthearted, like before the holidays, like we did me and my broadcast partners top 3 holiday movies, and like bantered about it on air, something something dumb, something silly. Polar Express is the #1 movie, by the way. It's non-debatable. You can't argue it's #1 movie. So yeah, and then you're ready to go. To me, it's the closest thing. I really enjoy play-by-play. It's the closest thing to um being a collegiate runner. The preparation that goes into it, and then the need to execute and work with your team when it comes to game day or race day, right? I just love that moment where it's 10 seconds before we go live for the open, fist bump broadcast partner, and I'm like, let's go. Let's have a good broadcast and work with the analysts, work with the director and producer, and try to put together a good production. So it's a lot that goes into it. You can't just show up and call what you see. If you're doing it right, you got to have some background and context, and really know the stories of the players and coaches, because that's what the other team program expects the broadcaster. So yeah, it's a lot of prep that goes into it, but it's fun, man. It's fun.
Yeah, and so I wonder, too, off that point, this is kind of a unique question, I guess, to you and the others that are in this position. So you're the voice of the Panthers, and I know like a lot of times you're going to have a second guy with you, but I think when you call the game at UM, and I saw you, this is like a month ago, I don't think you did have a broadcast partner. How difficult, like, is it to call games like solo like that? And I mean, I actually like the summer I did a lot of collegiate summer baseball alone. Like, do you find it more difficult to be alone, and like, how do you just manage that airtime? Because I mean, you always have that person to feed it back to, and you don't when you're alone.
Yeah. I think I learned a lot this past spring and summer doing Apple and MLS Next Pro, because all of those broadcasts were solo. Um, and those were on a visual medium. Those were TV broadcast, right? So as opposed to when I did the basketball game that you saw at Miami, when that was a radio broadcast. So if that that got me to a point where, because it's a different speed of play too, soccer versus basketball, right? You're going to have a lot of slower time, a lot of dead time. Ball goes out of play. Ball's being passed around midfield or the back third. Like, you can't just say Johnson taps it to Smith, back to Johnson. Like, you've got to start bringing context and stories and things into the equation, while then being able to translate seamlessly into analysis of the game as well, not just play by play, but provide a bit of analysis of what's going on as well, the why, the how, the typical analyst role. You've got to bring a little bit of analyst into it. It can't just be 100% play by play, even though in a normal broadcast setting you are, and the analyst does that. So I think that taught me a lot. And once I got to a place where I was comfortable doing that on Apple TV, it seems a million times easier doing it on a radio broadcast as well, where so much of it you have to describe the actions because people can't see it. And then on those quick, slow moments, maybe on free throws or substitutions, you can weave in some analysis and context and storylines as well, but it's a much quicker process. So it was definitely something to learn. And it just that emphasized how important the prep was even further, right? Because if I didn't prep well for a soccer game, man, there might be too much dead air on that broadcast. So and that made the Zoom calls extra important as well, right? Because in those slower moments, you can bring in quotes and things that the coach said about a player or the team or point of the season, or it was whatever it may be. So it really emphasized the value of preparation, of coach calls, and also knowing the game, right? Because if you're going to be an analyst, you have to kind of know what's going on, the goals of each side, what they're working on, what there's part of their strategy for the game. So, yeah, maybe a little bit tougher before, but I feel in a good place with it now.
Nice. And last thing about that, so if you're solo and you have to like analyze too, like you almost have to give like an opinion. Like if if you're calling a baseball game solo and you have an analyst and they make a bad pitching move, like it might be up to the analyst to say that and the play-by-play guy to be on the fence or neutral. But when you're solo, I mean, how much do you dip into taking an opinion? Because I've seen like, especially like just going to the national stage, like when a play-by-play guy will give a real opinion on air, it's going to generate controversy and clicks. So like, how do you know when to actually give like a real opinion, especially if you're alone because you're the only voice, you don't have like an analysis person. So, I
Right.
mean, how do you manage that when you're on air?
It's a good topic. I think the main thing is number one, if you're trying to do that to me, you want to make sure it's more opinion than a take, like a hot take, right? I don't think hot takes belong in a play-by-play broadcast. Number two, I think there's a way to do it well if you're being tactful about it. You can acknowledge that there may have been a different way to go about it without making it seem like you're smarter than the coach or you would have done it better than the coach, right? Like, let's give an example. This hadn't happened, but maybe I think this could be an applicable example. Like, let's say a coach plays plays a player in basketball with 3 fouls in the first half, right? And I'm play by play by myself, so I might acknowledge that right away. Like, hey, this is a bold decision here from Jim Larinaga to keep Nigel Pack in the game. 3 fouls here in the first half. His team up by 7 as well. We'll see how we'll see if Pack is able to stay out of further foul trouble. And okay, so maybe a couple minutes later, he picks up his fourth in the first. Obviously, I don't think this would happen, right? But like, that would be a controversial thing to do, right? So that's part of. I think it's an applicable example. Pack picks up that fourth foul. Maybe I'll say something to the effect of, you don't often see coaches play their star players with 3 fouls in the first half, particularly with the lead. It backfires here on Larinaga. Now Pack will exit with those 4 fouls, and it'll be interesting to observe when Pack does re-enter this game. Surely he won't play with 4 fouls in the first half. He is taking the bench now. So like, you're acknowledging that it's a little against the grain. You're not downright saying, well, I wouldn't play him here with 3 fouls, because I don't think anyone cares what you're not the head coach of that team. Now, maybe an analyst who played would have a little bit more leeway to give their opinions on what maybe if the analyst is a former coach, that's a bit more acceptable. But I wouldn't want to do that, even though I'm giving more analysis, right? Like, I give a bit of analysis when I say a bold decision to play with 3 fouls. I think that's questioning it enough without being disrespectful, without delving into I know more than the coach, without giving off that I'm a former coach or something like that. Still staying in my lane, while bringing up the potential downside of it. So I just think you have to be tactful, try to stay respectful, but throw out both sides perhaps as well, in a fair way, because ultimately, even though you're analyzing a bit more as a solo broadcaster, you're not a former coach or player, so you don't want to give that off.
Yeah, I just wanted to, that's a good answer, but I just want to bring it up because I feel like I see a lot of those like highlighted moments on air when somebody says something. I'm like, I don't know. I mean, there's so many different forces and like people you have to keep in mind before you really say something. So it's really hard. It's literally like really one of those hard things that there's just no manual on it, and a lot of gray area. But I mean, feeding off that point, I guess we're talking play by play. It's a very competitive position, and you obviously like went out of it to, go up to, as we're running out of time. But anyways, you go up to North Carolina right after college. Like, how hard was it to get a job in play by play, and like how much time did it take?
Yeah, it's they're not as plentiful as anchor reporting jobs. That's for that's for sure. I mean, you think about it, there's like what 134 FBS jobs, play by play, right? And then yeah, you have your you know aside from network TV at that point, there's single A, double A, triple A baseball. But ultimately, there's far less than a lot of markets have what 3 or 4 TV stations, maybe 2 or 3 anchors per sports anchors per. So, personally, I found it a little bit easier to just become a professional as a reporter anchor. I was fortunate I didn't have to go too crazy far away. Wilmington's close to Raleigh, Durham, a place I've been to a lot. It's close to Charlotte, it's East Coast. Um, and and to me, being able to have those play-by-play reps still come by way of Miami, that was important, that was meaningful. I didn't take that for granted. And the relationships that I built they ended up being very fortuitous for me. I think the person who reached out to the guy that was hiring at FIU was the former men's basketball SID at Miami. So it's just crazy the way those. I didn't build that relationship so that one day she could help me land a job. I just, enjoy the ride through Miami men's basketball through 4 years and built a great relationship and ended up helping me in the end. So um, I, I was able to get reps while still having the full-time anchor reporter job. I see some aspiring play-by-play folks go for independent league baseball if they can get one out of school, or single A, double A. Yeah, I certainly am very well aware of how difficult it is to break in to a full-time, play-by-play position. There were not a lot that opened up, the first year or two that I was in Wilmington. I think I applied for Texas A&M Kingsville. Didn't get a response to that, and that's not even a Division I school. I think there were only 3 to 5 openings that came up in the 2 years that I was in Wilmington, at least for a school, right? So and then of course, network play-by-play jobs, that's not something that's posted. That just you find an agent, you find a exec, and you build that relationship. Something comes open, you get contacted. But I couldn't look at that from where I was with no professional play-by-play experience. So all that to say, yeah, there were plenty of humbling moments and points in time where I was like, where can I find a break? Where can I find an opportunity? Um, I was very much looking into just trying to go up the ladder as an anchor. And I really wanted to get to Raleigh. I really wanted to get to Charlotte from Wilmington for that jump. Like that's where I was looking, because you can't really bank on a play-by-play job happening when so few were opening, right? So when the FIU job opened, I got the email that was a job up for grabs. Man, I had a flutter, man, had a flutter in the heart. Like when you get a good text from someone you have a crush on, it was a flutter. And immediately reached out to some contacts and pursued that. And so I don't take for granted being able to come back to a city that's meant a lot to me, to take ownership of things here at FIU and try to help build up the program on the broadcast side of the department, and start doing other things as well. Not just be limited to FIU. I'm always very grateful of that, and it's a great place to dig in and try to have as good a broadcast program as possible while still pursuing other goals and dreams. So it's very much worked out, and I try not to take that for granted.
Awesome. And do you have, by the way, any like the craziest game you've been a part of? And also, do you have like the best stadium or city you visited in your time as the voice of FIU?
Man, in college, for VUM, probably Miami, Arkansas College World Series game in 2015. Somehow it's the only win in Omaha we've had since '08. So I feel very blessed to have been able to be on the call for it as a walk-off. Man, I won't ever. We were on the me and Georgie Salas were on the we had a booth for two of the three games, but that game we were literally on the roof. Like the snipers and their canines were next to us as we were broadcasting. So as we called a walk off from Jacob Hayward. So that was an unbelievable experience. But it wasn't just the on air experiences for me. I'll always remember like um, staying at the ACC tournament to broadcast until the championship my senior year when I didn't have a hotel anymore because Miami got eliminated. So they went home. So I couldn't stay with a guy on the team. So, but I said, I'll figure this out. And uh, the second to last night, stayed in the media hospitality room until 3 a.m. Just like networking or just having a good old time with all the professional broadcasters. And then I went and slept on the couch in the second floor lobby of that media hotel, but like put a computer on my lap as I laid down to make it look like I had been working and just fell asleep. Guy wakes me up at 6 a.m. It's like, sir, is everything okay? Like, oh yeah, I was just working. Thanks for waking. And so that was my night at the hotel. Like I wanted to broadcast so bad. I like was homeless for 2 nights in Greensboro so that I could call those final games just for my tape. Me and Harry Kroll after a Clemson Miami baseball series were like sleeping on the concourse of the Atlanta airport before every time I go through that concourse, I'm like, that's where we slept. So we could call that Miami Clemson series. Just crazy memories through the years. Professionally, um, the Miami or the FIU Bahamas Bowl win was pretty wild. We won that game, and then our charter flight back to America never came, so we were bussed back to Atlantis. And at that point, we were delirious after like 6 hours in the airport and no food, and we were like, we don't even care that we're going to Atlantis. We're just exhausted. But then we walk out of the bus in Atlantis Resort. We look around. And we're like, okay, actually, this is awesome. And just like had a night in Atlantis after a bowl win. Like it was like, what is happening right now? So there's so many moments to reflect and think on. That was one half of the question. What was your other half? You asked memorable moments on the call. What else?
Yeah. Oh, what's the coolest stadium you've been to?
Oh, coolest. Man, probably Madison Square Garden, yeah, for the NIT championship. I'll always remember like we went to shoot around for UM and uh, team practice, team left, and then me and my couple VUM UMTV broadcast friends did our stand-ups, and then I started editing, and they left, and all of a sudden I looked around. I'm the only person around in Madison Square Garden on the court, so I just put my stuff down and grabbed the ball and started shooting. Just shooting free throws, shooting 3-pointers. I'm the mecca of basketball, the greatest arena in basketball, just shooting by my like what college student, how is this happening? So that was a memorable. Every time I watch a Knicks game, I just think, man, I got to shoot around by myself for 20 minutes in that building. That was incredible. And then in terms of FIU, yeah, been able to travel to a lot of cool places. But I guess off the top of my head, Marlins Park was a lot of fun. I know it's a sensitive subject from the UM perspective, but just such a unique game from a venue. Playing that in a baseball stadium where the Orange Bowl used to be, and then obviously it was a good day for FIU. So that was memorable as well. Got to take the booth of Seeloff for a day. Got to use his booth. I hope I did it justice.
I think you did. And again, for some reason, I'm getting a time limit on my Zoom link meeting as I have less than 1 minute. But that all said, I don't know if that's a good place to wrap up. Is it about the hour that I made it? But again, AJ Ricketts, voice of the FIU Panthers, giving some really good advice just about putting in the time. You get those cool moments and rewards. He's done a lot of work and is going to continue to do so with MLS and also Panthers as they're getting into, and around Miami with the Hurricanes going to start their baseball season in a month. So everyone should be on the lookout for that. We'll obviously have his social credentials in any of the descriptions below. But again, thank you, AJ, for joining me. I really do appreciate it. And All right, everyone. Well, interestingly, my Zoom conversation actually died out at the very moment I was about to try and close things out here with AJ Ricketts. But if you made it this far, really appreciate you tuning in. And again, AJ's got a lot of stuff going on. He's the voice of the FIU Panthers. He also is featured on the ACC Network, ESPN Plus, Apple TV, MLS Next Pro. If you want to follow what he's got going on, be sure to go over to his Twitter or X at AJ Ricketts. That's AJRICKETTS for those who are listening. Again, AJ Ricketts was very kind to join us, and I hope you enjoyed this edition of the Announcers Hour. We'll be back soon with another, but for the meantime, keep it classy out there. Thanks for tuning in.